Might need to zoom the pause mode a bit. I might just delete it. It's way too small. Anyway. The thing is, what I understand is the idea is to make the progressives use their political capital, invest their time into getting a vote, where it will undoubtedly fail, and most of them acknowledge this. And after it fails, then there's a few things. Number one, you've had a conversation on the national stage about Medicare for All. Number two, you now have a list of people who have publicly come out and pledged their support for it, and publicly come out and pledged their opposition to it in an official vote. A lot of people will say they will support something, but jump out once they actually have to put the vote in favor of it, because it's not politically beneficial. Though there's also the problem of, well, no, I'll get into it in a second. So the idea is you have a list of the moderates who will not support it that you now can go primary. You'd had a conversation about it. These seems to be the arguments in favor of it. Now, I know that Brianna Joy Gray, I don't know how to say her name. I think people say Gray usually for short. Gray wrote an article about it in Current Affairs. She had a very long conversation with Sam Seder about it, over 3 hours. And Destiny then did a react video to that. Anyway, there's a lot of content out there on Force to Vote. And I put out a tweet about Force to Vote, just asking, very genuine, very curious. Dylan wants to learn, okay, about what Force to Vote is about. Because I messaged, and you can see right here, can somebody make the argument in favor of Force to Vote? I did this like not even 20 minutes ago, and it already gotten a lot of interaction. And most of this, oh, that's on screen. That should not be on screen. Most of this is just people taking the piss, right? Most people saying forced to vote is when you're stupid and you do a stupid thing. And I'm like, okay, great. That's not very helpful, but thank you. So, like for instance, this actually seems to be a step plan. Let's read it. Make Congress vote on it. Lose the vote. Get people on record for their positions. And then question mark. The thing is, the idea is after this, you primary those people, put pressure on those people, I would assume is the idea, because Medicare for All is very popular. So, here is the problem I have with this idea. And there's a few problems. So, I'll do all the small ones first. Number one, national conversation. This has a national conversation about Medicare for All. We just had 2 election cycles where we had a national conversation about Medicare for All in 2016 and 2020, with Bernie Sanders in both elections bringing it up, and that greatly increased everyone's knowledge about Medicare for All, and we've been having that conversation for years now. I assume in about 2 years, we will have a similar conversation. Well, not basically in 1 year, because the elections kind of start in 2021. The campaigning, that is. We'll continue to have that conversation during the primaries, because the Republicans will say that's what the Democrats want. There'll be certain Democrats running for office, like Nina Turner. Nina Turner is probably is running in the special election, by the way. And that conversation will be up. Bernie Sanders will continue to use this platform. Organizations that organize around Medicare for All will continue to organize around Medicare for All. There's no reason why we need to have this specific vote to have that conversation. We've been doing that for the last 4 years without a vote on Medicare for All. Right? So I don't understand that aspect of it. I guess you could say it might increase the amount of the conversation that's happening, but I don't think it's worth the political capital being spent. Here's another thing. To actually get that, force a vote on Medicare for All, to filibuster and get up there and speak in favor of it, to organize people, to apply pressure to politicians, to have the vote, to do all these things, that takes up time, political capital, and it's a large investment. It is an investment. And that time and political capital, I think, could be better spent on goals that we can actually see us achieving in the next 2 years, especially when we have a contentious election in 2 years during those midterms. And I'm not saying, like, this is the most important election of our lifetime. What I am saying is we have a mandate right now from the American people. Joe Biden has a mandate. The Democrats in the House and the Senate have a mandate. And we need to deliver to them real reform in 2 years, or the Republicans will retake the House. They will retake the Senate, and it'll be over. Raphael Warnock's up for special election in 2 years. And we could lose the Senate, and we're back to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. And so I would much rather have progressives spending and investing their time on issues that we could actually get done. Ending our involvement in the war in Yemen is one example of that. While $15 minimum wage is already on the Democratic Party's platform, actually getting it through is going to take political capital and time investments. Passing legislation to strengthen unions. Getting child tax credits through the House and Senate. More funding for local governments, local and state governments. Climate change reform. There are policies that are part of the Green New Deal. The thing is, the Green New Deal platform isn't, this is the New Deal, you pass it all with one strike of the pen. If we're going to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to use that leverage and start doing climate change plan. Biden's already pledged over close to $2 trillion. He wants to do $2 trillion in climate change reform. Getting that reform out in these next 2 years, many of them tied to Green New Deal jobs, that's something that could be great for the next 2 years. And you know what? If we really want to show the American people that we are delivering on the mandate they gave us, so they elect us again, so we can have 4 years of change in this country, then on to 6 years, then on to 8 years, then on to 10 years, a decade. We got to deliver. And I think spending that time investing in this when we know it's going to fail seems pointless to me. Definitely when there's other strategies to help us get closer to that. Electing people like Nina Turner into office. Building more grassroots organizations that will lobby on this issue. So that's a big problem I have with it. It seems to be the expensive nature of the political capital, with very little rewards. Now, here's another thing that people bring up. The idea that, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a moderate who declares, well, I am against Medicare for all. They'll have to make it official. Even though many of them have already made it official, like Joe Biden, for instance, publicly, and Joe Biden was the one who won the primary. Hey, I'm against Medicare for all, and they win elections still. But the idea is that since Medicare for all is so popular, someone will come out and vote against it. Then a primary candidate can come out and say, this person voted against Medicare for all. I will vote in favor of Medicare for all. And then that person will win the election. And then we have more people in office. This would work maybe, except for one tiny itty bitty little problem. Tiny itty bitty little problem. Here's the problem with that. A public option is more popular. If you poll Medicare for all, it does, the majority of Americans support Medicare for all. Now you can start splitting hairs about what if you have to give up your health insurance. Oh, I like my health insurance. And then you start going smaller. But if you just say Medicare for all, majority of Americans support it. If you say public option, even more Americans support it. So, if you or somebody is like, my opponent didn't vote for Medicare for all, then all they have to say is, yeah, I support the public option, which is more popular. And then boom, crisis averted. Will that mean they won't get the support of certain progressive orgs? Yeah, but if the idea is you want to use this very popular idea to clobber your opponent, it doesn't really work if your other opponent just responds with a more popular idea. How does that work? Not to mention, you could just primary those, like somebody brought in chat, anyway. And there's also the scenario where a moderate Dem in a very progressive district knows, because these are going to be the areas where you would actually be able to primary these Dems. For example, Jamal Bowman, AOC, most of them are not winning in extremely conservative communities and outing the Dems. We're not kicking out Joe Manchin to replace him with AOC. That's not what's going on. We're replacing a moderate Dem in a place like California, New York, quote unquote, right? Quote unquote, very blue areas, and then we're replacing them with progressives. But let's say, for an example, you're a moderate Dem, and you see this legislation going through, and you're looking at a primary in a year. The legislation's gonna fail anyway, so just vote for it. Just vote for it. If for whatever reason you are in an area where, and it's gonna be in these areas that are extremely progressive, that's where you're gonna see the most primaries from extremely progressive people, the people we would like to see be more dominant in the party. If it's not gonna pass, you can vote for it, and it just doesn't get through, and then you can claim, look, I voted for it. Might not be perfect, but I voted for it. And of course, even if they don't do that, they can still respond with the public option. Now, I'm not saying that pressuring people on Medicare for all is bad. I just, and hypothetically, this could be good. But I think the amount of political capital that you're putting up for grabs here for something like this, when the real biggest gain we're going to get out of this is possibly being able to pressure more moderate Democrats with this vote in extremely blue districts, which that's up for debate, considering they can always just respond with public option and or vote for it anyway. Then there's the problem, of course, with this idea of the national conversation. I mean, that's cool. We get more national conversation, but we've been having that national conversation for the last 4 years through 2 election cycles, and we're going to have it again during the midterms. I just don't think it's a worthwhile investment. It doesn't make any sense to me. Is there anything I'm missing here? Is there anything I'm missing? And the thing is, I'm not bringing up Jimmy Dore because Jimmy Dore doesn't matter. I mean, obviously he matters, but when you come to the merit of the arguments, I don't need to bring up Jimmy Dore to disagree with this from a strategic point of view. But here's another thing. Doing this against the party, generally wanting this or not wanting this to happen, when we know it's going to fail, when it's going to take up time and all that, this is going to piss off Nancy Pelosi. This is going to piss off a lot of people who are powerful, and it's going to affect a lot of progressives that we like in their ability to get committee positions that are important. And your response, of course, would be, well, Dylan, shouldn't we piss off the establishment? Yes, but not pointlessly. If we were pissing off the establishment to just barely get a vote on ending the war in Yemen, ending our support for the war in Yemen through, I'd be like, you know what, go for it. You know what, we're going to have penalties. We might not get that committee position, but we're saving thousands of lives. But we're not barely going to get Medicare for all through. We're not even going to get close to getting Medicare for all through. The risk-reward balance we're supposed to have here is way out of whack. It's a ton of risk for barely any reward, if any. Okay. So, does everybody understand my position and my problem with it? It isn't out of a deep hatred for progressive healthcare or anything like that. I don't have some huge hatred for Gray. I mean, I disagree with Gray, but I don't have some hatred for Gray. I do have problems with Jimmy, but that's unimportant to this conversation, really, when we're talking about the merits of the debate. Jimmy Dore, you can remove Jimmy Dore from the equation completely and still make the argument. Because I see a lot of people making the argument here, but a lot of the argument is Jimmy Dore is mean. I don't care if Jimmy Dore is mean. Jimmy Dore has been wrong on a lot of stuff. His recent Boogaloo comments, his comments about the war in Syria, and him talking about Assad and chemical weapons in a very yikesy way, and then later saying he didn't even know what Rojava was, yet he was making comments like that. We could look at him comparing members to the squad to monkeys. Some people have debated me on, like, well, he was saying that We can watch the clip on stream if we need to, but people have defended it. But I think it didn't look good. It didn't look good, and I think it's pretty obvious that what he did. Did anybody give an argument for FTW? Because I haven't seen any. Seems like it would just fall, and then the Dems would lose political momentum. Fail, and Dems would lose political momentum. Yeah, I think these next 2 years should be primarily concentrated on getting the reform necessary for us to justify the mandate we've been given. And this will not meet that political end whatsoever. I'm not saying don't have some Democrat infighting to try to get progressive values up there, but this seems ineffective infighting and like a waste of political capital. So that's my position on force to vote. I didn't want to insult anybody. I didn't want to yell at anybody, but that's my honest position on it. Now, if I go through all these tweets, basically, Vosh got involved and everybody got involved, but I haven't seen anybody give me a real decent argument. Okay, here it is. Here's somebody who actually supports FTW. Okay, I support force to vote. Pressure is the only way to bring change. So, this first thing, pressure is the only way to bring change. Okay. You can pressure them in other ways. Organizations can pressure them. The amount of pressure that's being applied, comparative to the things we're losing, our time, our political capital, our investments, with the minimal amount of pressure that's going to be applied with such a vote, with the possible loss of seats on committee, I mean, I just don't, I don't see it. I think you can apply pressure in other ways that are more effective and less risky. I know that from experience from having been in the DPA leadership. Leadership only response is pressure. Progressive needs to use all the power we have whenever possible. If not, it's just a waste of power. Okay, but what if we want power in committee positions? What if we want to use our power, shouldn't that power be concentrated on justifying our mandate for the next 2 years? And if we use that power on force to vote, when we could be getting real victories like in the war in Yemen, isn't that a waste of that power? Okay. How does force to vote pressure anyone into adopting more progressive policies? Generally asking. It gets the issue on the agenda. There would be a public debate on the issue that the majority of Americans agree on. The thing is, the problem with this part is, we've been having this debate for the last 4 years, and even after 4 years of debate, the candidate that was running on Medicare for All as their main policy point, the thing they hit on endlessly, a candidate that's widely liked by most Americans, did not get elected as our candidate for the 2020 election. Public option still polls higher than Medicare for All. We've had a lot of progress in 4 years. But the majority of Democrats don't support Medicare for All. We've been able to get victories upon victories with Jamal Bowman, AOC, Jayapal, Ilhan Omar, Ro Khanna. I could go on. But there's still a lot of challenges we need to deal with in continuing to increase its popularity. Because, of course, if public option is more popular, then we need to compete with that when it comes to its popularity contest. We need to get more people elected. We need to build more grassroots organizations. And in the meantime, we need to invest in the other progressive ideas, like Green New Deal, ending the war in Yemen, etc., that we can actually achieve in the next 2 years, that can help justify our mandate. And we also want to get on committee positions, powerful committee positions. It would mobilize people to get their Congress people to support it. Like what happens with Sunrise work on the Green New Deal resolution, except this time it's actual legislation. Yeah, look, Sunrise's work is good, but Sunrise has done its work without having a vote on the Green New Deal, period. And you know what? I think they can do that work without a vote on specifically the entirety of some Green New Deal. And not to mention in the next 2 years, with the type of plan that Biden has for climate change legislation, right? The fact that he wants to put trillions into climate change plans, They should continue to do that work. But if the majority of Americans did not support a Green New Deal, and they had a vote on a Green New Deal, and lost committee positions for a Green New Deal, and the conversation for the last 4 years has been about a Green New Deal, and the pressure that was going to be applied will only really work in extremely progressive districts, and they can respond with a plan also and counter to that is also more popular than a Green New Deal. I just don't think the foundation is laid for any type of a vote like this to be effective. Not to mention, I think that our time and money and resources are better spent on justifying our mandate. Anyway, I appreciate that this person answered in good faith, though. Okay, so I think I've given my position pretty solidly, right? I think everybody understands why I believe what I believe. So, is there any questions? Anybody who's like, Dylan, you're wrong on this part, you're wrong on that part? Is there anything like, Dylan, you dumbass, you didn't consider how the golden rule of the third dark triad of the polygonahedral or whatever associates with the seventh dimension, and that's why I'm wrong here? Can anybody who wants to put me on this? Is there a better way to spark the national public debate? Yes. Remember when Bernie Sanders, not during the election season, just had a debate with Ted Cruz on national television about healthcare and absolutely clobbered him? You can do things like that. National Nurses United can organize rallies, events around stuff like this. You know what? Code Pink, even though I have a lot of problems with Code Pink and other organizations, just had a huge rally in DC that I actually considered going to today about ending the war in Yemen. There was no vote on Yemeni legislation. There should be, because that can actually get through. But there's other ways to spark a conversation. Definitely without just such a high investment for such a low reward. And penalties. Dylan, you dumbass, you didn't consider how your luscious hair affects butterfly migration patterns. That is a good point. I didn't consider the butterfly migration patterns when thinking about force of vote. Not to mention, when we think about Medicare for All has been a constant issue of debate for the last 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5. We've seen the polling for it increase massively. We've seen general knowledge about Medicare for All increase massively. I think we can continue to have that conversation without a floor vote. We've had that conversation for the last 5 years without a floor vote. Well, in those instances, because Bernie Sanders was on the public stage. He's still on the public stage. He's going to be the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. He's going to have an extremely powerful stage. He's going to continue to preach for this for. In 4 years, we're going to have more progressives speaking out as they run for office. In 2 years, we're going to have progressives speaking out as they run for office. Hell, in 2 years, we'll have progressives who are currently in office running for re-election, making this part of the platform, speaking about it publicly. We can have more events where Bernie Sanders debates people like Ted Cruz on the national stage in non-election years. We can have organizations like National Nurses United or other organizations that want Medicare for All come out in public, Our Revolution, and speak for Medicare for All, organize on Medicare for All, pressure politicians to sign on to the bills. We can pressure people to sign on to a bill, pledge they'll support a bill, without having a vote on a bill. If that vote is going to fail. Not to mention, I think having a vote on something and having it get crushed is going to take the wind out of the sails of a lot of organizers. Honestly. I think some of this is motivated by the concerns that the Democrats will not have this kind of majority again for another decade or so. The problem is, whether you believe that or not, you are not getting Medicare for All in 2 years. I'm sorry, but that's just a reality. Even the people who advocate for forced to vote acknowledge that's not going to happen. It isn't. There's a million reasons why it's not going to happen. The first reason is the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate, I still don't know if they're actually all in favor of it. in favor of it. And even if they were, you'd still need basically every single Democrat in the Senate to sign on to it, and you need to get rid of the filibuster. Because you're not, or if you don't want to get rid of the filibuster, which Joe Manchin has pledged he will not get rid of, so that's already dead, you then have to get how many more Republicans to sign on to it? You're going to get Rand Paul and Mitt Romney, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz? Who are you going to get? Chuck Grassley? Who? Legitimately, how are you going to get it through? It's not going to happen in these next 2 years. So you need to justify your mandate through other means, like a $15 minimum wage. Not to mention, now I've heard some people say you can do Medicare for all through executive order, but someone would have to show me how that's possible. Because that is massive, massive, massive chunks of the budget. If you look at the French healthcare system, if you look at the NHS, if you look at how much money is allocated for the healthcare system, I just don't see that as possible, that you can just do that from executive order. I haven't seen an argument for that. I'm pretty positive you can't. So that path is blocked. Budget reconciliation, like the options to get this through, they're all blocked. They're all blocked. And we need to continue to organize on this for the next 2 years, not force a vote which will fail. So unless you can convince me that you're going to get all the Democrats to sign on to it and get Joe Manchin to say he'll get rid of the filibuster, and then you'll get it through, or you can convince Republicans to sign on to it, all while making sure Joe Biden doesn't veto. It's not going to happen in the next 2 years. I'm not saying not to apply pressure, but let's be realistic about that pressure. None of you are Lenin in chat, okay? Gray is not Lenin. Jimmy Dore isn't Lenin. Nobody's doing this October revolution for Medicare for all. It's not happening.